The first time Amara met Chika, it was in their first year in the University of Lagos. Chika was loud and was this very confident type of girl who would walk into a room and everybody would be turning their heads to look at her. Amara, on the other hand, was very quiet, was very observant, was the opposite of Chika. Wherever Chika spoke, Amara would always listen. And when Chika laughed loudly, Amara would smile faintly because of her naive nature. Soon they became very good friends after a very small misunderstanding in class, one that turned them into a long conversation and lunch that even stretched into the evening. And from that day, after their misunderstanding, they became inseparable. In their second year in the University of Lagos, they've already become very good friends and people would always call them sisters. Chika was this very adventurous type. She would always drag Amara into going for social events. When Amara was the steady one that was very loyal, would always help Chika to study before their exams and would always nurse her after she has gone through a relationship breakup. In fact, it was even one of these heartbreaks that Emeka entered into the picture. After Chika went through a terrible heartbreak, they decided to go for a party. That was where Chika met Emeka at a friend's party. Emeka was very tall and he always had this very easy smile and his voice would always carry this authority that every girl liked about him. Chika, being her usual way, walked straight to him and teased him about his drink choice. And eventually both of them ended up dancing together all through the night. Amara was also at this party, but she had secluded herself in one corner and was just watching the two of them from across the room. She remembered the way Emeka's eyes were lit up whenever Chika laughed. She noticed how Chika's hand lingered on his arm. In fact, she was noticing everything. When Chika told Amara the next day that she had met someone special, Amara smiled and pretended to be happy for her. But deep down inside her, she was having a heartache that she could not even name. 2 years later, after Chika and Emeka met, they were getting married. Amara stood beside her friend as her maid of honor and was helping her adjust her wedding gown and also adjusting her veil. Chika, in excitement, turned to Amara. Chika, in her excitement, turned to Amara. Amara, you know you're the sister I never had, right? Amara, with all her big smiles, said, I know. Chika said to her, I want you to promise me something. If I ever lose my way in this marriage, I want you to tell me. I want you to be honest with me. And Amara smiled. Of course, I would always tell you the truth. But as Chika turned to look herself in the mirror, Amara's eyes were filled with anger and hatred. Especially when she looked at the altar and she saw Emeka, who she was secretly in love with, standing proud and so in love, waiting for his bride. And she hated that none of this love was for her, but for her friend. After the wedding, Amara would always visit Chika and Emeka very often. At first, it was to help Chika settle in. She would cook, she would keep company with them when Emeka worked late, but gradually, their attention shifted. She started arriving and coming to the house when she knew that Chika would not be around, that she is out running errands or maybe she went to the market. She would even stay longer in the kitchen with Emeka. Sometimes she would try to have a playful conversations and would be touching Emeka to get his attention. One evening, when Chika stepped into the bedroom, Amara leaned closer to Emeka and said with a half smile, Do you know you're lucky that she have you? Do you know she's lucky to have you? You know that's right. Emeka said, we are lucky to have each other. In Amara's mind, this was not even the answer she wanted, but she did not give up. She just pretended to be happy. After a while, she came back to the house again. When Chika was not around, only Emeka was at home, and she started to spoil his mind towards Amara. She started to say, Do you know that Chika has been spending a lot of time with that her male colleague? Emeka said, What colleague? Amara said, Oh, maybe it's nothing, no. In fact, forget that I said something. She would always drop little hints here and there, just enough to make him wonder or to make him suspicious about Chika. And when her little antics did not work, she began to drop hints here and there, just enough to make him wonder. And when that did not work, she began to suggest that Chika complained about him behind his back. She painted herself as the loyal friend who would never betray him. But Emeka remained loyal to his wife. and that loyalty became an obstacle Amara was determined to remove. Out of desperation, Amara began to research, not at once though, but she began to tell herself that she was curious. She began to look up the way to make somebody disappear without a trace. But soon, her searches became even darker. She started to research about fast-acting poison, undetectable poisons, symptoms of heart failures, natural substances that mimic heart attack. She was telling herself that it was only to know, but deep down, she was already preparing. On this, after she had made her decision on what to do to remove Chika, she called Amara. Amara called Chika to come to her house that it was urgent. When Chika came to her house, Amara asked her to sit down and she served 2 cups. Hers was plain, but Chika's cup was not plain. They talked about small things, work, family, and Amara kept the conversation light so Chika would not notice the faint bitterness in her drink. 5 minutes later, Chika coughed. Chika started to feel that something was clutching on her chest. So she clutched her chest tightly and she was now gasping for air. Amara stood up and started to shout, "Help! Somebody help me!" But by the time the ambulance arrived, Chika was already lying on the floor. She was gone. The doctors called it a sudden heart attack. But Mrs. Nneka knew the truth. She told the police what she had seen, that she saw Amara putting something into that cup before Chika arrived. But without any substantial proof, the police could not do anything about it. Soon after, Chika was buried, and Amara saw this as an excuse to frequent Emeka's house. And before you know it, less than a year later, Amara wore a white wedding gown. She married Emeka in a small ceremony. She claimed that they both had found comfort in each other's grief, but her happiness was short-lived. Knock on the door. 2 officers stood there, and behind them was Mrs. Nneka. The investigation had taken months, but the toxicology reports from preserved tissue samples revealed the truth. Amara was immediately arrested, and as the handcuffs tightened around her wrist, she realized the cruel irony. She had gotten the man, but she had lost her freedom, and in the end, the truth outlined the lies and the hatred.